Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today we have a little roundup of some listener questions. We have a question from a mom who was raised by a dad who yelled, hit, and punished, and she's finding it really hard, if not impossible, to stay calm with her child, and she wonders what she can do. We have a question from a parent of a 6-year-old who complains that the day was terrible even after having a really fun day of activities, and this parent is worried that the child is growing up to have a negative or entitled attitude. And finally, we have a question about how do you stop a toddler from throwing food off their high chair. Okay, so let's dive in. Actually, before we dive in, if you have a question for me, you can record it either by going to my website, and under the podcast tab, there is a link there to record a question, or we will put it in the show notes. And if you ever wonder about the show notes, it's just on your phone underneath the description of the podcast. We always put a link to all the resources that we talk about in the episode. And so we'll put a link to the website where you can record a question for me if you have a question. And also, I would like to invite you to share this episode with a friend and to leave me a review on either Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. It really helps us to reach more people. And if we can reach more people, we can change the world one family at a time. Okay, let's dive into the first question. Let's take a listen to Jen.
Hi, I grew up in a strict Italian fathered household who yelled, hit, and punished. I have grown up to lose my temper. Even when I'm trying not to, I always slip. How can I ensure my child is going to grow up with me being patient, calm, and not losing my temper if I'm finding I can't even go through moments of calmness?
Aw, Jen, that is so hard. And I really want to tell you, if nobody's told you this before, that you did not deserve to be yelled at, hit, or punished when you were growing up. Even if you acted out, even if you were, quote, disrespectful, even if you didn't do what you were asked, you still did not deserve to be yelled at, hit, or punished. And, I think that at least part of the reason why it's so hard for you to stay calm now when you're a parent is this is what was modeled for you, right? When things are difficult in parenting, parents yell, hit, and punish. So that was what was modeled for you when you were growing up. And then B, when your child does something that is just ordinary child behavior, I don't want to brush my teeth, or no, I don't want to go to school, or, whatever the thing is, probably very similar to the things that you did when you were a child. When that happens, it feels very dangerous to you because your inner child, I know it's a cheesy phrase, but I think it's really something that is true and important. Your inner child is going, no, kids shouldn't do that. This is dangerous. Kids shouldn't talk that way to their parents. Kids shouldn't refuse what their parents are asking them, because when you did that, you got hit, or you got yelled at, or you got punished. So there's that small, maybe that 5-year-old you inside of you who sees your child not listening or, refusing to do what you ask. And there's that big part of you that remembers that as a big danger zone. So it's triggering on that level as well. It feels like an emergency. So whenever our child says or does something that is difficult for us, it feels like an emergency. Our body and our brains register that as overwhelm and sets off that fight, flight, or freeze response, which is dysregulation or, not being able to stay calm. And also, I guess C, it is annoying. It is annoying when your child isn't cooperating, when you need them to do something or ask them to do something. So that in itself, not only for your inner child is it overwhelming, but it's overwhelming as a parent when you're trying to do 10 things and get out the door and you're not getting cooperation. And then I think the final thing that's coming into play here is because of how you are raised, and I'm making a lot of assumptions because all I have is your 30-second voice memo, but I imagine that unless you've done a lot of work, and I guess if you'd done the work, you probably wouldn't be having these struggles unless you've done a lot of therapy work. And as an aside, I think talking to a therapist would probably be a really fantastic idea for you. But unless you've done a lot of work, you still have these leftover feelings of shame and feeling unworthy because of how you were raised. So what we know is that kids who are raised with a lot of yelling, hitting, and punishing often have a really low sense of self-worth, which is also what shame is, feeling unworthy and unlovable. And if we have that easily shame-triggered feelings inside, if we have easily shame-triggered feelings inside of us, it can be a lot harder to stay calm when things are hard with our kid. So for all of these reasons, and great, maybe I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but for all of these reasons, this is why you're having such a hard time staying calm. So what do I suggest that you do about it? If therapy is available to you, I think that's something that would be really great. If therapy is not available to you, I would look up some reparenting resources and see if you can do some work on your own to heal some of those feelings of from when you were a child of not being good enough and not feeling worthy and lovable because of how you were raised. So I would start with that. The next thing that I would do is I would not have your very first goal to be to stay calm in the moment, because you've already said that that's too hard for you and you're not able to do it. I would have your first goal to be to revisit times in the day when you wish that you could have stayed calm at a quiet moment, maybe after your child goes to bed. Revisit those times and replay them in your head with a different reaction. You hear athletes talking about visualization and how important that is. So I'd like you to visualize yourself staying calm when your child is being provocative or not listening or whatever. Get to a quiet place, replay the scene in your head, and then visualize yourself responding how you would like to respond. And you're actually going to begin to rewire your brain. You can even add in there a stop, drop, and breathe in this, visualization. So your child does something, yells, "I hate you." Visualize yourself pausing, because this is what you're going to eventually be trying to do in the moment. Visualize yourself pausing and using our peaceful parenting tool of stop, drop, and breathe. So what that means is you stop what you're doing. And if you need to clap a hand over your mouth, turn away, whatever, just stop what you're doing, whether you've started to yell or you're about to yell. Drop your agenda, and it doesn't mean forever. So whatever you're trying to get your kid to do, just drop it for that moment while you bring yourself back to calm, and breathe. You can add a hand to the heart if that feels comforting to you. So stop, drop, and breathe is just that pause button so you can gather yourself before you proceed. So when you're doing the visualization, visualize yourself starting to get upset, then visualize yourself doing the stop, drop, and breathe, and then visualize yourself responding in the way that you'd like to respond. So I think that would be a really great place to start, because right now I know it feels like there's zero time between your trigger and your response, but there is time in there. It's really fast. It's a split second, but as much as you can practice pausing, the better you're going to get at doing that in the moment. And then, your first thing that you want to work on after you've practiced the visualizing is doing the stop, drop, and breathe. Just turn away, clap your hand over your mouth, stop talking whenever you're starting to feel triggered, and just really start to try and tone that muscle, I guess it is, that pause button that you've got. And then after you pause, and you can add this to the visualization as well, I want you to give yourself a big dose of self-compassion. I hear in your message that you're feeling kind of disappointed in yourself, that you can't even manage to stay calm for a moment. And I've never, ever, ever seen any parents do the work that they want to do and be the parents that they want to be while being hard on themselves. So I want you to give your inner child some love. I want you to give yourself some love and remind yourself, even though I yelled at my child or whatever it is, I'm still worthy and lovable. This doesn't mean you're going to stop trying to stay calm. It just means that when you don't manage to stay calm, instead of beating yourself up about it, you're going to give yourself some love. That is, giving yourself compassion and empathy is the only way that you're ever going to be better or do better. You can't do better by making yourself feel worse. I've never ever seen that work. So using your stop, drop, and breathe, and then giving yourself some compassion. Anyone would feel frustrated in my position. We'll put a link. I have a download about a self-compassion break. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. But give yourself some compassion after you stop, drop, and breathe. And then I think once you've sort of got that managed, start looking at your triggers. I actually have a free course. It's called How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids. You can find that at sararosensweet.com/yelling. And I think that would be a great place for you to go. And you can start that now, or you can work on the things I've said and then start it. But it really takes you through tracking all of your triggers and figuring out how to start to heal triggers that you can't prevent, or to work on preventing some of the triggers that you can. So I think that would be really good for you. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And really, Jen, please reach out and let me know how things are going. And this, the last thing I want to leave you with is that don't think about this as all or nothing. Like you're talking about, I don't want to raise my child like this. You're sort of looking at this from a global and catastrophic perspective, that you've either got to nip this in the bud right away, or you're going to end up parenting just like your father did. There's a lot in between there, and there's a lot you can do. But if you're coming at it from this sort of black and white thinking of that, I've got to learn to stay calm all the time right now, that's going to feel overwhelming and impossible. So start with, little baby steps. I've got it all laid out in the course, and I hope that you find that that's really helpful. So sending you so many hugs, Jen. Okay, our next question is from a listener who has a 6-year-old, and this parent says every time they do something fun, a play date or a fun weekend event, when it's all over, the child says they had a terrible time, and this parent is really worried that their child is developing a negative outlook on life. First of all, this is pretty common. I've heard this from a lot of parents. And take a deep breath. Don't worry. This does not mean that your child is developing a negative outlook on life. It also doesn't mean that your child is entitled, because that's another thing that I hear a lot. This particular listener didn't express that fear, but I'll just add that in because, people will say, we went to the movies and then we went out for ice cream and pizza. And when we got home, the child said that we never do anything fun around here. So don't worry. Doesn't mean that your child is, going to be negative in life forever, or that they're entitled. But what does it mean? What I find the most common thing is that what it means is that your child is disappointed that it's over, but they don't really know how to say that, but that the fun time is over. I've also heard this, when a parent takes a kid out for some special time, like a one-on-one parent and child date, and then it's over and the child says, like, you never do anything with me. So what I really think that this is just the child is disappointed that it's over. Another thing that can cause it is sometimes kids get overstimulated and they have a full emotional backpack. If you're a new listener, you might not know what an emotional backpack is. It's a metaphor that my mentor, Dr. Laura Markham, came up with, and we use it all the time in peaceful parenting. It's a metaphor for our bodies, and it's whenever we experience tensions, stresses, big feelings, and we can't process them in the moment, and they don't have to be negative or difficult tensions or stresses or big feelings, but it can be from a lot of excitement and, lots going on and just a general overstimulation on the nervous system. We hold those big tensions and feelings in our bodies until we have a chance to process them. And so unless we help our child consciously, or they spontaneously cry or laugh, those are the big ways that kids process the feelings in their backpack. Unless those feelings are processed, they're going to be carrying them around, and it can make them sort of, a little bit difficult, cranky, demanding, whiny, however you want to describe it. So it could be just from a big day, your child's being overstimulated and a little overwhelmed, and they've got a full backpack, and they're kind of looking for a way to unload it and to empty the backpack. And one way kids do that is to be provocative. And so your child could be saying, like, I had a terrible time, unconsciously looking for a way to release all those feelings from their emotional backpack. I think parents also can feel unappreciated when this happens, right? Like you've just spent all this time, energy, and money to do something fun for your kid, and then they complain that you never do anything fun or they had a terrible time. So my first piece of advice for parents, if this has been an issue, is really try not to take it personally. This is, as I've said, if they're overwhelmed or they're disappointed and have big feelings, this is not about you. This is just about the feelings that your child is having. And also, don't think that it's going to be like this forever. Oh my goodness, they're being negative and unappreciative right now. They're going to grow up to be a negative and unappreciative person. How your child is today in this moment is not an indicator of what kind of person they're going to grow up to be. Or I should say, not necessarily an indicator. It doesn't necessarily mean anything other than they have big feelings that they don't know what to do with. So don't take it personally. Don't make any big catastrophic global assumptions about what this means, because it doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't necessarily mean much. It's just, a dysregulated, tired 6-year-old, and the things that they say are sometimes a little bit wacky. So what do? I would say listen and empathize. So just, you had a terrible time? Wow. And just listen. What do they have to say? What feelings do they need to, unload or offload? How can you help them feel understood? Maybe there was one little thing actually that disappointed them that they want to talk about. And once they can process through that, the rest of the day comes into a sharper focus. I think you might say something like, I wonder why that was so hard for you, just to get the conversation going. But really take everything they say with a grain of salt, because if you know they had a good time, you know that it was a lot of fun all around, just let them vent, process, kind of get it off their chest. Let them empty that emotional backpack. The other thing I would suggest you do, and you could do this with the first strategy of the listening and empathizing, or you could do it, instead, is just to get playful. You could say like, a terrible time. I know. I hate the aquarium. All those beautiful fish and, the annoying snacks that we got, like the yummy cotton candy. The horrible cotton candy that we got. So you can kind of get playful in a way. And if you can get your child laughing, that'll help them, as I mentioned, empty their emotional backpack. So I think really the biggest thing here is just don't take this too seriously. Don't take it too personally. And just really think, okay, maybe my kid has some feelings that they need to process. How can I help them by helping them feel understood, listen, empathize, and maybe get playful, help them empty their emotional backpack. And if you're worried that, your child's not appreciative or that you don't feel appreciated, I think about this thing sometimes where, the complaint of, well, I didn't ask to be born. That's kind of true. Like, kids are here on this planet because we brought them here, and they don't really owe us anything. Yes, it's nice if they appreciate things that we do for them, but at 6, that's not really age appropriate for your 6-year-old to have an understanding of how the world works and to know how lucky they are. And it's not a sign of being entitled for that 6-year-old to, complain after a day at the aquarium. And it really is age appropriate for them not to understand how their lives are maybe better than some other kids in, different circumstances. That comes later, and it doesn't mean that, if you are a parent who does set appropriate limits and you don't give in to everything your child wants, just because they complain about, not getting something that they want after a big day doesn't mean that they're necessarily entitled or spoiled. So just, take it all with a grain of salt. Give yourself appreciation. And that's sort of where I was going with that they didn't ask to be born. Give yourself appreciation. Know that you're doing these things because you want to be a good parent and you want to do fun things for and with your child. And you're not doing them because you need them to appreciate you. I hope that helps. Okay, let's go on to our final question about toddler throwing food off the high chair. This listener asks, how do I get my 23-month-old to stop throwing food off the high chair? Okay, so first of all, this is totally normal toddler behavior to throw things. There are things called schemas, play schemas, and these are ways of looking at child development. So I think there are 7 or 9 schemas. I'm not exactly sure how many, but one of the schemas is the trajectory schema. And a schema is it's ways of thinking about how children learn. So children learn by doing different things. Basically, you can think of your child as a little scientist, and the things that they do follow different patterns so they can understand how the world works. So there's a schema that's called a connecting schema. So you can think of, putting things together, lids off and on, Lego or Duplo, just putting things together using glue or tape, putting together trains, things like that. That's a connecting schema, and how they learn how things go together. Another one that I remember really common from toddler years is the transporting schema, which is how kids carry things around, right? They carry things around from place to place and put things in other things, which is the enclosing schema. And then they, put something inside something else and then carry it to a different spot. And this is how kids learn. So that trajectory schema is what's happening when your child is throwing things off of the high chair. Trajectory schema can also show up in when kids run from place to place, that they themselves are being the trajectory. So your child throwing things off the high chair is engaging in completely normal scientist toddler behavior. And yes, it's annoying because it makes a mess and, it wastes food. And I would say, try to take a deep breath, know that this is developmentally appropriate, and they are completely going to grow out of it. That said, what can you do in the meantime while they're still in their little mad scientist phase? Well, one thing I would say, if your child is throwing food off the high chair, they could be doing it partly to learn, but also partly to get your attention. So that, might be a combination of the trajectory schema plus like, hey, mom or dad, look at me. So you might sit with your child while they're eating. And again, I know that sometimes we like to do other things while they're in the high chair, but this, is a moment in time. So sitting with them, giving them that attention that they need. And the other thing is, if they're throwing things, they're probably not hungry anymore. And I would give a warning, and I would say something like, the food stays on the high chair tray. Keep the food on the tray. So just remind them of the limit that you want is the food stays on the high chair tray. And if they continue to throw the food, I would just very kindly and warmly say, oh my goodness, looks like you're finished eating. And I would take them out of the high chair. A few times of that. And a 23-month-old is old enough to learn that if I throw food, mom or dad or my caregiver is going to think I'm done and they're going to take me down. The other thing that I would think about is, yes, how do we stop that unwanted behavior, or at least reduce it? Because, we can't stop them from throwing food off of the high chair, but we can give them the attention that they want, and we can remind them that if they're throwing, that it's a sign that they're finished eating. And the other thing we can do is try to meet that need. So if they are, being their scientists that they are and experimenting with the trajectory schema, what can you do that can meet that need for throwing? So, maybe you say, okay, looks like you're done. Let's go and play a game of throwing your stuffies. So, get some stuffies or some like little pom-poms or something that's soft and it won't hurt anything if they throw it. Let's play a throwing game. And so, you sit on the couch and throw some stuffies onto the floor, or you throw stuffies into a basket, or you go outside and you throw some stones into a puddle or sticks into a puddle or something like that. But how can you engage your child in throwing activities that are appropriate, that aren't going to waste food or break anything, and really try and just channel that need? So they are showing you by throwing the food off the high chair, A, that they want your attention, B, that they are experimenting with throwing, and C, that they're probably not hungry anymore. So I hope that helps, and don't worry, it won't last forever. And if you have a dog, it makes the cleanup a lot easier, which is what I found when the kids were little. All right, everyone, if you have a question for me, don't forget that you can record a voice memo just like Jen did. The link is in the show notes or on the podcast page on my website, which is sararosensweet.com. And if you are struggling at all with staying calm, you can check out my free How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids course. That's at sararosensweet.com/yelling. And if you are one of the people who sent in the questions, I would love to hear how it went for you. Okay, and I will see you next time on the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.